Welcome back, everyone. In this section of the course, we're going to be discussing methods and in particular functions. Let's start by briefly going into the details of methods in this lecture. So we've actually already seen a few examples of methods when learning about object and data structure types in Python. And methods are essentially functions that are built into objects. And later on in the course, we're going to learn how to create our own objects and methods using object-oriented programming and classes. Right now, I want to explore in a bit more detail how to find methods and how to get information about them for built-in objects in Python. In the future, we'll explore creating methods. So let's open up a Jupyter Notebook and quickly discuss methods in built-in objects. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is create a simple list and say my list is equal to 1, 2, 3. Now we've already seen before a couple of methods that are useful for a list. So we've seen the append method where we say dot append, and we can append a new item to a list. So then when I see my list here, I get back 1, 2, 3, 4. We've also explored the pop method off a list, pop, and if I just hit empty there, it pops off the last item of the list. And now if I check out my list, it no longer has that last item, number 4. What I want to show you now is a couple of quick ways to get the list of methods in Python for various built-in objects. There's too many methods really to go through them, all of them, in this course. Otherwise, we'd have hours and hours of video of things that you could just explore yourself, and a lot of these methods you don't use that often. So instead, we're going to show you how you can discover methods on your own. The first thing you can do is in Jupyter Notebook, once you've defined that object, hit dot and then hit tab to see a list of all the attributes and methods available for you on that object. Now the other thing you can do as well is actually called the help function. For example, I'm going to hit tab here, and let's explore a function, or a method, excuse me, that we haven't actually explored before. For instance, we haven't actually explored this insert method right here. So I'm going to call insert, and there's two different ways to get help on this. I can do shift tab in the Jupyter Notebook right after this method call, and it will tell me what it is. So it's going to say insert object before index. If you're not using the Jupyter Notebook and you can't do that shift plus tab call, what you could do is call the built-in help function. So if I run the built-in help function and pass in this method, it returns back that same doc string. So if you're using .py scripts, maybe you're in PyCharm or in the text editor, you can use this help function and run this in order to get back the actual documentation on the object. Your third option is to actually view the Python documentation. So let's quickly jump to that. Okay, so here we are at the Python documentation. It's at docs.python.org, so docs.python.org. And in this case, we're looking at the documentation for 3.6. In the future, you may be looking at the documentation for 3.7 or 3.8. But you'll notice here that the first thing we see is a what's new in Python 3.x. So you can click on this and it will take you to this link where it just is almost like a little blog post of the different improvements and things they've changed in the newest version of Python. And as a beginner in Python, there's going to be a lot here that you don't really understand yet. But as you get more and more comfortable with Python, you'll notice that there's a lot of cool things as you begin to kind of update to the latest versions of Python. So here we can see that in Python 3.6, there's this really cool secrets module that allows you to generate secure random numbers for managing secrets. Previously, we saw how there's random number generation, but the secrets module is actually cryptographically secure generation of random numbers. So that's an extra thing they've added in 3.6, and you can explore everything they've added on that link on the main documentation page, What's New in Python. Then there's a tutorial link which kind of shows you the very basics of Python, and that may be helpful to you if you want another reference for that. Then there's the library reference and a couple of other links as well as FAQs. So there's FAQs, frequently asked questions, and you can check them out here. General Python FAQs, programming FAQs, design and history, and then a couple more interesting things like using graphical interfaces with FAQs. So I would explore those if you're more interested in that. But the main thing we're here to talk about is this library reference. And it says keep this under your pillow, and for good reason. So when we click on this library reference, this is basically all the information about all the classes, objects, and modules in Python. And a lot of times when you do a Google search, maybe you find a Stack Overflow link. A lot of times in those links, people will link back to the standard documentation here. And as you scroll down, you'll notice it basically discusses the official documentation of everything we cover in this course. So we can see here it starts off with the built-in types that we discussed earlier, such as Boolean types, numeric types, sequence types like list, tuple, range, and then it continues on to talk about exceptions, text processing services, and later on it talks about more advanced things that we're going to cover later on, like collections. Then it talks about the different modules, such as the math module, functional programming module, file and directory access, and you can scroll down, you can see all this useful information about all these built-in modules. So there's a ton of stuff here, and this is kind of the official documentation for a lot of these functions and modules. One thing to keep in mind is that this is not the most readable place to come for answers. You usually want to go to Stack Overflow, where someone has added kind of a nice explanation, but this is the official documentation, and it is pretty good as far as documentation goes for official programming languages. So let's imagine we wanted to go back to that example of using a list object. Well, we could search for it here, and we'll find it here, sequence types list. So there's various sequence types. You click on here for list, and then it says the common sequence operations. And you'll notice that it actually talks about a lot of the operations we've discussed, such as xin, and it gives you the results, so kind of explaining what's happening here, the min, the max, length, indexing, and slicing. It's also all explained here, kind of in a more official way. And if we scroll back up, we can click here on list to go to official list class, and it will take us and explain the various methods. So what sort does when you call it on a list. And it does that for the rest of the object types, and you can also see list implements all of the common and mutable sequence operations. So if you want to know more about those operations, click here on common and it'll take you back to discuss those operations, such as index and count. So this is where you can find a lot more detailed information about the various methods available on objects. As you're a beginner in Python, you won't be visiting this page that often, but as you get more and more advanced, you'll find that a lot of the answers you're searching for are really only found in the documentation. But as you're beginning, I would recommend that you use this help function to quickly find doc strings. And as a reminder, you can use Shift-Tab to quickly get this documentation string on methods and functions. Okay, that's the very basics of methods. Hopefully it was all pretty familiar since we've already discussed methods in the past. Coming up next, we're going to talk about is functions. We'll see you there.